Hello guys, how's it going? Toofty here. To all you wonderful people who have subscribed to my channel, who have clicked on this video, thank you very much. I appreciate it so much. I don't say it enough. At Toofty TV, if you want to follow me, if you like my content, awesome, love it. Let's jump in. We've got a very old series being brought back to life, the Dealing With series. It was a really popular series back in the day. I say that as if, it was 20 years ago. It's very difficult finding the footage for this kind of series, so it kind of disappeared for a bit, but it's back, and today we're dealing with Ubers. For those of you who haven't seen it, we've done Soldier, we've done Scout, we've done Heavies, we've done Sentry Guns. Check them out if you've not seen them already. They should still hold up. As always, today we're going to be focusing on pubs, we're going to be focusing on the Demo Man, although I'm sure most of these tips will apply to other classes too. Finally, we're focusing on the regular Uber, not the Kritzkrieg. So let's jump in and let's see how you deal with Ubers. So there's a few things I wanted to mention before we get into actually what you do when you're face to face with an Uber. These are things you can think about before the Uber is popped. And the very first one is simply being aware of them. Look out for them, look out for the sparkly beam, even listen out for your own medic sizzle, because, in that case, they're probably likely to pop on you very soon. So yeah, just try and be aware of them at all times. If you're near the beginning of a map, you're on payload, a medic comes out with a pocket, they're probably going to Uber, right? So just be aware of that, kind of act accordingly, maybe leave some distance, make sure there's some cover in the way, or whatever it is you need to do. And you'll find in pubs that when you do get a good game, there's say a couple of medics on each team, you can kind of sense the pattern as to when about the next Uber should be coming. This is really important obviously when you're playing comp, and the whole game revolves around the idea of this race to the Uber. So the other two things I wanted to mention, number one, the force, and number two, even better, the drop. These are terms most of you will probably know all about, basic stuff, but I wanted to mention it anyway. Obviously the dream is you drop the med either as he's building or equally good when he has full charge, getting that burst damage out onto him so quickly that he doesn't even get a chance to pop and save himself. That's the ideal scenario, but of course it's not always practical. So let's talk a little bit more about the force. Sometimes, just sometimes, if you're aware of them like we talked about before, you can get in there early and actually force the medic to pop their Uber. The idea is to waste their Uber so they don't get any value out of it, and so that the Ubers that you have on your team can push forward and do a lot more work. So let's take a look at this example here. So we're on Gold Rush. I'm coming out of the spawn here. The game's just started and I noticed that we have a medic up to the right there with this heavy. As I said, the game's just started and therefore he's likely to have Uber. So let's focus them down. There's always a lot of enemies up in this little area here anyway. I'm able to get enough damage out as to scare the med into popping. He was a bit freaked out. He saw the spam coming in. He popped to save himself and he was in a horrible position. Our own medic pops and we're able to do a lot more with the Uber. So the second thing I wanted to talk about in a little bit more detail, which I think is really interesting, is the idea of avoiding the crowd. That may seem obvious, I don't know, but in a very neat example, you have the enemy Uber in front of you and you have your own team behind you. So what I've found from playing this game for a long time is that, especially in pubs, when someone is given an Uber, that player has their eyes on the biggest group of enemies they can see, and they will run towards them. They're hungry for kills, they just want to charge in there and do as much damage as possible. So a very simple thing to do is obviously spread out. Often moving directly away from the Uber is actually a bad idea, because imagine there's a group of 5 of you, you're all running backwards, they can just chase you down, get that splash damage into that group. Whereas if, say, a couple of you break off to each side, some of you move back, some of you may even move towards him, that spreading out, that scattering makes it very difficult for them to pin enemies down and finish them off. By going in an unusual direction, maybe kind of diagonally towards them, they don't want to break their charge towards the enemy group. They may just ignore you completely and you can get away unharmed. Generally speaking, if you seem like hassle to kill, they'll want to try and find an easier target. So I found another example here, and this one perfectly illustrates my point. We're on bad water, an Uber comes around this corner and I am meters away from him. I'm in big trouble here. 90% of people will just run backwards. If I did that right now, I think he'd be able to finish me off. So what I'm going to do is actually run towards him. I know what you're thinking, madness. But like I said, there's two reasons I'm doing this. One, it's unexpected, so it'll kind of throw him off slightly. But number two, and more importantly, I'm moving away from my allies. It's kind of a win-win at this point. If he chases me down, he's wasted his Uber on this one person in here. If he doesn't, I've distracted him and I've managed to escape alive. Okay, so a few more things I wanted to chat about. These three kind of fit together quite nicely. The idea of waiting the Uber out. Sometimes this involves hiding if necessary, there's no shame in it. Taking cover, waiting around a corner, and where possible, leaving a trap for when the Uber fades. That's the beauty of the Demo Man. You can be prepared for when that Uber fades, and you can absolutely demolish them. In some cases anyway, it's not always that easy. First of all, it's always a good idea just to hide for a second. If there's nothing you can do, you can replenish your ammo, you can grab some health. Even doing that is a good idea. Second of all, if there are other enemies around, you may want to focus your attention on them. What you'll find is when an Uber is going off, that's obviously a sign for the team to push. Quite often, some of the other players may get a bit of a free ride. The attention's basically drawn from them, so try really hard to focus on those other players who are trying to sneak in behind the Uber with all the chaos going on. Make sure those guys don't get off scot-free. So, by waiting it out, hiding, you can be ready to pounce the moment it's over. But even better still than all the things I've just mentioned, if you're in a safe place, you've got some cover but they've not actually seen you, a great benefit of the Demo Man is that he can whack down a trap at their feet, ready for when the Uber fades. There's a couple of things you may want to bear in mind as you do this. Obviously, the Uber's probably moving forward, so you may want to spread these traps out a little bit. You can often kind of work out where the Uber's going to go, so you can get them kind of in front of them. And obviously, it's a lot easier when it's a heavy, a slow class. They're not going to move as far, especially when they're spun up. So this is another great example actually of quite a few of the things we talked about already. Again, we're on Dust Bowl. I'm chilling by these rocks. I see an Uber popped in the distance. We have a heavy, a slow moving class. Immediately you know what he's going to be doing. They're going to be marching forward and aiming to the right where the sentry guns normally live. So what I'm going to do is just sneak off to the right here, try and be out of sight, out of mind, load up my ammo, and then get a few stickies down roughly at his feet. He spotted me there, so I need to be a bit more careful. Again, taking it easy, grabbing some health, putting some more stickies down at their feet and waiting for the fade and then detonating to finish them off. This final example here is of a really juicy trap I set down for an Uber on the car on the very last point of upward. I see the Uber come in, I use the boxes as cover to break line of sight as I lay down that trap next to the car, which is where I'm assuming they're going to be heading if they don't retreat. It looks like they didn't see the trap, so I keep my eye on them as they get closer to the car and I'm able to detonate at just the right time to cause a huge amount of damage and finish them all off. One thing you got to be careful of is if you are trying to set up a trap for when the Uber fades, try not to det too early. I know it's obvious, but it's so easy to do. Here I was on Dust Bowl again. I kind of thought they might go down the stairs, so I was trapping up that route. Turns out they went down to the left, so I put loads of stickies down at his feet, but I clicked just a second too early. I was a little bit too excited, completely wasted my trap, got demolished, and we lost the round. Okay, so this is a really fun technique that you can use when you're trying to deal with Ubers. So obviously the Pyro with his air blast is the best class to try and deal with Ubers this way. He can completely deny them, juggle them against a wall and completely waste any value of the Uber. But that being said, other classes and especially the Demo Man with all of his stickies can juggle the Uber and completely ruin their lives. So we've talked about a few things here and each situation is different, but sometimes you kind of need to take action more quickly. So maybe by juggling the medic in the air, you might be able to save a teammate. Maybe you have time to do both. You can try juggling them and if not, set a trap down anyway. Again, obviously think about the things we talked about earlier, where they're moving, where they're likely to go, the kind of path of the map. You're going to need 2 or 3. Obviously the more you put down, the more you can juggle them, and you can do some spectacular juggles, I'm telling you that. And the great thing is you can knock them off course, it's disorientating for them, and sometimes in the best situations you can actually split the medic and pocket up. One thing you do have to be aware of though is that this can occasionally work in the opposing team's favour. If you say launch them both onto the point or something like that. Another example here on Dust Bowl, I had a trap set up, an Uber comes around this corner, I decided to detonate, try and juggle them off course, the medic goes flying towards me, so it kind of worked well. It looks like my team was able to finish up anyone at that choke, but unfortunately I am battle medicked to death by the needle gun. A little bit embarrassing, I'm not going to lie. Okay, so finally, it's worth a mention, sometimes you just gotta get the fudge out of there. If there's nowhere to hide, if you think there's a good chance they're gonna take you out, you can get out of there as quickly as you can. And as a Demo Man, of course, you can sticky jump out of there. Obviously, if you're a soldier, you can rocket jump, or if you can't do any of those, if it's an Ubered soldier, for example, you might be able to surf that damage to help you get out of there more quickly. So to finish off, this is a nice little example. I was playing Harvest, I'm going onto the point and there's an Uber popped right in front of my face. Even though my health is kind of fairly low, I know that by sticky jumping away, there's a much greater chance of me living through this engagement. This guy can pretty much just focus on me. We're pretty close, he's probably going to take me out. It's just worth bearing in mind that even if your health isn't that great, here I end up with very low health, but still, at least I'm alive and I can grab the health and carry on my way. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed the revival of this series, dealing with Ubers. Pretty interesting topic. A lot of pretty obvious stuff there, but hopefully there's some things in there that was maybe of interest to you guys. I'm still looking forward to doing a dealing with Demonites guide for you guys. But if there's anything else you're struggling to deal with, let me know and I'll see what I can do. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching. Really appreciate your views, your eyeballs on my content. So thank you very much, and I'll see you guys in the next video.